Making a puppet for Adam Savage.
To the puppet nerds of the world, this may sound absurd, but this is the place you need to be. We'll do an interview and then we'll stitch and glue all of the dolls, we'll make it shake. If you wanna be in the know and to play like a pro, subscribe to Puppet Nerd.
Welcome back, Puppet Nerds. Adam Krutinger here, and today we have a really fun build. If you've been following my Instagram, you've seen some of my travels. Early in the year, I had the opportunity to go to the Henson lot and see Puppet Up.
Look how close they are to the stage. Holy cow.
Which was incredible, and if you ever have an opportunity to see it, definitely take that opportunity. And then I did a trip up to San Francisco, which was really awesome as well. And I got to visit Adam Savage in his cave. And both Henson and the Tested team were so wonderful. And I'm so grateful for those experiences, and I will never forget it. And it was all made possible by the Dear Jack Foundation. It's a cancer foundation for young adults, and I applied and was accepted to their life list. And those were the things that I wanted to do, and Dear Jack made it happen. So be sure to follow their accounts on social media. I'll put the links right here. And if you have the means, I'm sure they would very much appreciate some donations as well, so they can keep doing this for other people in similar situations. However, when I knew I was going to visit Adam Savage in his cave, I didn't want to come empty-handed. I wanted to make him another puppet. You might remember the puppet that I made a couple years ago. Pretty happy with how it came out considering how much time I had. I decided to make it the night before because he was in town in Buffalo doing a show called Brain Candy years ago. I definitely rushed that puppet a little bit more than I would have liked to, but it came out pretty good, again, considering it was a one-day build. But this time around, I had a little bit more time, so I wanted to make something a little bit nicer. And recently, I had been noticing that Tested has been posting many videos at Henson, and specifically many of them revolved around the Fraggles. Now, of course, I'm not going to make a Fraggle replica, but I wanted it to look kind of like it could live in that world. So you'll definitely see it's very reminiscent of a Fraggle. However, one thing that I did do a little bit different is the head. I actually gave it more of a frog style head. I quite literally used the pattern from my frog video for the head. And the reason I did this is because I wanted him to be able to play with a puppet that could get a lot more expression out of the mouth plate. Anyway, let's jump into the build. So to start off, I'm using some F3 fleece. As far as I know, the only place to get it right now is Dharma Trading. I'll put a link down in the description. And this fleece is incredible. It hides seams really well. You'll notice a moment ago I used a pencil to trace it. The only reason why I did that is because this is such a light fabric. Yellow has such a low color intensity. I didn't want lines of a Sharpie or a highlighter to bleed through. So a pencil is graphite that would sit on top, and I could easily kind of just wipe it away with my hand after. Now that both of those pieces of the head are cut out, I just start hand stitching it together. And it's always a good idea to use pins when doing this because that keeps the fabric from shifting as you go. Since you're only doing like one tiny spot at a time, if it's not pinned, sometimes by the end, those edges just won't line up. Now that that's all stitched up, I'm using some crushed pan velvet as the inside of the mouth. And again, this mouth plate is the same pattern from my frog pattern that's on the Puppet Nerd website. And again, same technique of using this ice cream lid to get a very flexible mouth. You gotta be really careful which plastics you use though, because some of them start off flexible, but then get fatigued and can crack. But with this kind, I've never had a problem with it, and it's just extremely flexible. For a flexible mouth plate, you only want to use the lids because they're typically made out of a different plastic that's more flexible. So that way the lid can flex over the body of the container. Now, I know this body was built off camera, and that's just because this was a prototype that I had lying around and wanted to recycle that foam. But I believe it's the same pattern from my monster pattern that's on my website. It's called the Medium Shake. And I have a full tutorial series on that as well. I'll link that down below. Now this is an eyelid. I don't always do eyelids on my puppets, but once in a while it can be a really cool look. And the pattern making process for that is exactly the same. I just cover the eye in tape, peel the tape off, put cuts in it until it lies flat, and then use that as a pattern. For this puppet, last minute I decided that I wanted to put a lining in the head. Now, I don't typically do this for my frogs. However, the only reason I'm doing it for this puppet is again because that yellow is such a light color. I don't want the flesh tone of my skin changing the brightness of that yellow. By having a white lining, it's really going to keep that yellow super bright and clean on the inside. Here I'm just doing a quick basting stitch to keep the lining against the rest of the fabric. Now I'm putting together the eyes. This is an eye plate. I have a whole video on how to make an eye plate for your puppet, and again, that's part of the frog tutorial. If you watch that frog tutorial, a lot of the components to this build are explained in depth in that video. But the eye plate is important because it keeps the eyes from just wobbling around. And as we know from my Puppetry 101 book, is that the eye focus is the most important part that makes your character seem alive. Even more important than the lip sync. Think about anytime you talk to a person, you feel connected with them when you look into their eyes. Now, I didn't really make a specific pattern for this. Since I was just using foam body parts that I had lying around from old prototypes, I just draped the fabric and made a one-time pattern just using that fabric by itself. And now I'm just stitching it together using a whip stitch. Now I'm going to do some grooming on this puppet. I'm not exactly sure how it's going to come out. I don't have a plan when I'm doing this. But as I was cutting, I realized, I kind of wanted to keep the fur around the neck a little longer. Again, almost like Kermit's points that he has on his collar. I thought that might be interesting to keep that parallel since it's kind of a froggish head, just to have that kind of long fur collar. And I'm trimming the rest of it. I typically like to leave it a little bit longer at the bottom, but let's see how this comes out. Here I'm cutting the hands out of foam, and this here is the armature wire. This is, in my opinion, the most annoying part of doing a puppet are the hands of this style. And if you enjoy doing hands, my gut tells me you might not be making them quite right and or in a way that has longevity. Because to really do it right, it is extremely tedious and annoying to do. So I bent around the tips of the fingers so they don't poke through. I'm encapsulating the metal in hot glue to give it a little bit more support, as well as to keep it from fatiguing, and it also can help it from rusting if it gets moisture in there. And then I encapsulate all that inside of the foam using contact cement. Make sure that you leave it to dry and get tacky before you attach both pieces together. Also, I put little rod pockets in there. For this puppet, I decided to use the same fabric that the head was made out of and the hands. That just makes it easier to hide. The same way the fur collar is a little longer on this character, I want to do little, almost like fur wristbands going around the wrist. Thought that might be a fun little detail. Now I'm tracing and cutting out the arms, and then I'm just gonna stitch it on. Here I am stuffing the arms and hands with foam, just combing out the fur to change the texture a little bit, and then cleaning up some of these seams. And now I'm stitching the hands on, and now I have a few visitors. Ready? Come on over.
Well, Daddy, you're supposed to put a pull-up on Ernie.
No, Mom said I can put on either one. Come here, come here, come here. Say hi to everybody. Oh, there's my big helper, Fred. Wave, Fred. Say hi.
Hi.
Okay, and Ernie's coming over too. Come here, Ernie. Ooh,
Wait.
Diaper man. Ugh. Look at this big guy. 1.5. He's the size of like a 4-year-old. And Fred is going to preschool in September. And you're excited for that? She was in preschool this year, but it was pre-K3. Ernie, you're not going to preschool.
No.
Where are you going, Ernie? You're going to Mama's school, right?
Dad.
Yeah. Wave, wave, wave to the camera. This camera here. Wave. Hi. What's the name of your doll here, Fred? Ernie. Everyone like Ernie's mullet? He's rocking the mullet. Look at that. Fancy Nancy. Oh, no. Yeah, Ernie is a puppeteer, for sure. All right. You guys, what are you guys doing? Get ready for bed? It's really late. Luckily, it's summer. Fred, will you guide Ernie out?
Well, I don't know.
Yeah, you do.
No.
Ernie, go follow Fred. And Fred, will you shut my door after Ernie goes out? Not before. Make sure it's after Ernie goes out. Go ahead, Ernie. Go, go, go. All right, let me switch it back for you guys. Yeah? Just twist it and shut it. Twist it. There you go. Pull hard. Good. Thank you. Yeah, they have gotten big, haven't they? Oh my goodness. Having trouble keeping up. And we're back. And here I'm testing some pupils. These are velvet dots, and I'm just using those to get the placement because I like these other eyes that I found. These are stuffed animal eyes. So I'm just using the velvet dots to get the eye focus perfect, and I'm just actually drilling straight through them so I can put the peg of the stuffed animal eyes inside those holes. And what I love about these eyes is that they're not round, they're slightly oval, which gives the character a slightly different look. You can't really tell from a distance, but it's one of those small details that I like to do once in a while. And I just set it in with some super glue. Making a little uvula using Sharpie, and I'm just using some Ultra Suede to make a quick tongue. Now I wanted to give this character a little bit of sympathetic movement, but I decided that I did not want to use any feathers. I think feathers can look nice and they've got great movement, but the thing that I hate about feathers is that they just don't have longevity and they can get real beat up in travel. My puppets get heavy use. I'm constantly shoving them in a bag to fly somewhere, or doing walk around with kids, and sometimes I'll grab a feather and it'll just break really easily. So lately I've been experimenting with a whole bunch of different substitutes. This is a real nice white one, and I got this at Michael's, and it has really great secondary sympathetic movement. Now this is the tail. So I just bent a 1/8 inch piece of rod into a loop, and I'm using some spiral boning for the rest of the tail. That's typically used in corsets and dressmaking to give support to the dress with still having some flexibility, which again is perfect for a tail. I do 3 layers. I do one long piece, the length of the entire tail. Then I do one that's probably about 3/4 of the way up, and then one that's just about 1/3 of the way up. That way the tail has slightly more structure as it goes down, and that the whole thing isn't completely floppy. And I decided that I want to do a little bit of a pattern on the tail by color blocking these 2 colors, the yellow and the purple. Now that all the pieces are connected on the tail, I'm going to start wrapping it around the spiral boning. Here I'm stitching it on using a whip stitch. Now I'm just trimming this up, and I decided that I want to match that sympathetic movement on the end of the tail too. So I'm just wrapping this piece with a little bit of fur for a transition, and I'm going to stitch and glue it on so it has a lot of support. And he's going to have a little tail like this. Isn't that cool? I like that a lot, actually. Dare I say, I'm impressed myself. Wasn't sure how exactly it was going to come together, but I'll tell you, I like it. Now we have to add the weight to the tail. Now in the past, I made a little loop and then put a bunch of washers on it, but I wanted something that I could hide a little easier. So I just used this little piece of wire, wrap it around both ends, and put a handful of bolts on it until I found a good weight that kind of counterbalanced it so that the tail would sit naturally in a nice position. And then I just wrap that in gaffer's tape so that it's very comfortable. And you really want to use gaffer's tape. Don't use duct tape or some other sort of tape. Gaffer's tape is great because it's fabric based, whereas the duct tape and the Gorilla tape, they dry out and get all crusty after a long time. But this fabric based tape won't. And also this gaffer's tape takes glue very well. So I just cover it in glue. I'm using Super 74 and just taking some scrap fur, trimming it, and just kind of gluing that fur to the tape. And I like doing that instead of wrapping it in fur, because when I wrap it in fur, it just becomes too thick and too bulky. I have found that this works really well. Now I'm just putting a few little details inside the tongue, and now I just need a hook to attach the tail to. I grew up watching Mythbusters, which is how I became a fan of Adam Savage. And a fun little fact, there was actually a Krutinger on one episode of Mythbusters. It was my great-great-grandfather, Ernie Krutinger. He was part of the team that created one of the first rocket belts. And here's a quick clip of him from the episode putting it on. Anyway, back to the build.
Now, even though I left myself more time, unfortunately, I wasn't able to get nice pictures and glamour shots of the puppet. Yet again, I ended up finishing it the day that I was leaving and meant to take pictures in my hotel room before I got there, but it just completely slipped my mind. However, here are some photos of me gifting it to Adam, and here's a little video they sent me of him playing around with it.
Yeah. Hi. I don't know what my name is yet. He is so beautiful. I'm still learning. Yeah, he is.
Bye. Anyway, thank you again to everyone at Henson, Tested, and the Dear Jack Foundation. If for some reason this is the first video of mine you're seeing, this channel has tons of puppetry resources. Everything from learning how to be a puppeteer, Puppetry 101 videos on learning how to perform, how to build puppets, even if you're new to building. I have some puppets that are using professional techniques and some that just use a hot glue gun. So there's really something for everybody here. I have free patterns on my website at puppetnerd.com. I do have some paid patterns on my website too that really go to help support this channel, but do not buy one if you have not put together a free pattern first. Because if you can't do the free one, you're not going to be able to do the paid ones. Even though those characters look a little bit more simple, they're actually much more difficult to put together. And they're download, so the second you pay for it, it just shows up in your email. Anyway, that's it for now. See you next time.